Hello, and welcome to Politics and Societies of Southeast Europe. Our topic for this week is socialism and post-socialism, and I'm going to look at this in terms of two general topics. The first is consumerism and the development of markets and consumer habits under socialism, and how consumer life in socialism was a little bit different from the way that consumerism developed in the same period in other parts of the world. And then when we move on to the post-socialist condition, we're going to talk about post-socialist economies and their functioning, and we're also going to talk a little bit about nostalgia. I emphasize the point of nostalgia because a lot of what we deal with when we talk about socialism and post-socialism is in terms of images and stereotypes. And there is a standard stereotyped memory of socialism. We're going to try doing inline video again. We'll see how this works technologically. But the stereotype vision of life, especially consumer life under socialism, is that there was a lack of color, a lack of luxury, a lack of diversity, that it was uniform, that it was drab, that they were constantly faced by shortages. I want to show you an example of this, and the example that I am going to show you is a piece of advertising. It is for a fast food chain called Wendy's. They make hamburgers, fried potatoes, that kind of thing. It is from, I believe, 1985, and in this little piece of advertising, what is emphasized is, as compared to this hamburger chain where you're offered a choice of things that you want, that consumer life in socialism does not offer you a choice of things that you want, but pretends that it does. So it's a little bit of marketing propaganda. I'll stop talking about the ad and show it.
Pay attention, please, thank you. Is next day there? Very nice. Is next evening there? Very nice.
Having no choice is no fun. That's why at Wendy's, every hamburger isn't dressed the same. You'll get your choice of fresh toppings, fresh tomatoes, fresh lettuce, fresh onions, cheese, bacon, and more. Having a choice is better than not.
Is next swimwear?
So yeah, that's the image that was promoted at the height of the Cold War. It's a comical image, of course, but this is the kind of stereotype of what everyday life and consumer life was supposed to be like in the world of state socialism at the height of the Cold War, as represented through a comic advertising clip for hamburgers. What do we want to make of this stereotype? Well, uh, first of all, to the degree that a lot of the stereotype originates in economic differences, especially differences in the level of prosperity and the degree to which markets are supplied in the eastern and western sides of the Cold War division. This is a fact that becomes important and becomes visible Mostly after 1965. Between 1945 and 1965 in Europe, levels of income, standard measures of prosperity, levels of availability of consumer goods are about the same in East and West. After that, they begin to diverge, and by the 1980s, when this imaginary fashion show is filmed, there is a very, very big difference. And why is this? Well, there's a standard critique of the way that economies functioned under state socialism, and this is a critique that's developed by, among other people, the anthropologist Catherine Verdery. And what Catherine Verdery argues about command economies in state socialism is that fundamentally, first, they were not socialist, or at least they were not non-capitalist. What these were capitalist monopolies that were operated with the state as the principal capitalist. So to talk about them as socialism, you might be able to talk about it in terms of policies of distribution and social policy, but not in terms of the ways that labor and markets functioned. Second, that they encouraged waste, they encouraged corruption, and because they produced shortages, they encouraged the development of an informal or gray economic sector in which goods were bought or sold or exchanged outside of the boundaries of the market. Now, what can we say in general about consumer life and consumption in the socialist environment? There are a couple of factors that are probably more important than others. The first is that socialist consumption was not simply an imitation of capitalist consumption, although there was some of that. The emphasis of consumption and the development of consumer culture in the state socialist period was on distribution and on promotion of at least the perception that everybody in the society shared on the prosperity that was being developed. Now, very frequently what this meant is that to have a beneficial position in consumer markets in state socialism, your position was made favorable not by what you were able to own, not by personal ownership of private goods, but by the ability to have access to the use of public goods, in particular housing and services, but especially when we're talking about Southeast Europe, holidays and tourism. This developed into a major sector, it remains a major sector for generating international income in the states of Southeast Europe. And it is during the period of state socialism that enormous resorts, hotels, holiday campgrounds, things of this type are built. And part of the purpose of this is in order to attract tourists from other parts of the world who would come and visit and spend money and improve the budgetary position of the state. And part of it was that holidays were offered to everybody as a part of their employment. It came to be regarded as a universal right that everybody ought to be able to spend 2 weeks a year at the seaside or in the mountains at a hotel in a state-owned or state-operated holiday spot. And this was a way in which citizens were encouraged to perceive that they, as consumers, were participating in benefits that were generated by the state, and that they were doing so equally. There's another dimension, though, to consumerism and the development of consumer culture in the period of socialism, and that is this, that consumption and the promotion of consumption was used for the purpose of propaganda. There was a negative image of the way that consumption was organized in the capitalist states of the so-called West as decadent and as contributing to social division, and there was a positive image of consumerism in the states of state socialism as encouraging people to participate in the fashion movements, the other movements that brought pleasure to life in the world, in a way that is equal and in a way that contributes to solidarity. And so you saw a lot of importation of styles in this picture on the top right. You see a pop group pop singing group of the 1960s, the socialist, the Dreamers, very much emulating the style that would have been the style of the mid 1960s of pop groups anywhere in the world. A similar thing with the photo below that one, which is a scene from the film, the 1961 film Ljubav I Moda, Love and Fashion, where the same Italian scooters, Vespa scooters, that became a symbol of the stylish and luxurious life were enjoyed by, in this case, the actress, I believe that's Beba Lončar, driving through Belgrade. Manufacturing, bringing the level of manufacturing up to a level that was comparable to and competitive with other parts of the world, was a goal. And in this photo on the left, it's a standard for the time piece of advertising for an automobile. The automobile in question is the Zastava 101, a family sedan that was made at the Zastava factory in Kragujevac in what is now Serbia. The fact that Yugoslavia was able to make its own automobiles and to sell them domestically and regionally and in several other parts of the world was a point of pride. Now, in some places also, we can talk about this promotion of contemporaneousness with consumer life in the rest of the world, of luxury as a way of controlling sources of social and political dissatisfaction. That is, as dissatisfied as people may have been with the level of political and civil rights that they had, they were able to live fairly decently and fairly well, and especially to eat fairly decently and fairly well. So this is a strategy for buying social peace. It came to be labeled in Hungary as goulash socialism. So the idea that as long as people can have enough tasty things to eat, the sources of social dissatisfaction will be controlled. So what I want to say is that socialist states, states with state socialist economies, did promote consumerism, consumer life, did promote fashion. The stereotype that you saw in that little advertising clip is at least partly untrue. But they did it in an unusual way, and they did it in a way that involves some contradictions. First of all, there was a contradiction between the promotion of consumption as a source of pleasure and the ideological tenets of socialism that emphasize sacrifice for the collective and for equality. Second, there was conflict and tension between the aspiration that was illustrated in the promotion of consumerism to participate in the same currents that more prosperous parts of the world were participating in, and the relatively peripheral, in fact increasingly peripheral as the period of the Cold War goes on, economic position of the states involved. Third, there was always tension, and this took the form of political tension between two different purposes for producing goods for consumption. One, to meet needs, and the other to satisfy desires. So there was constant conflict and constant argument over whether it was important that there should be a good supply of things like fashionable clothing, popular music, if this interfered with providing an adequate supply of, for example, housing or transportation infrastructure. And this contradiction was never resolved, and it became a tension, even though socialist societies like to talk about themselves as societies not involving classes, became a source of class conflict and of conflict between especially the urban and the rural populations.